Hello and welcome to this Foster Care Institute online training webinar, Noncompliance and Defiance. I'm your host, Dr. John DeGarmo, founder and director of the Foster Care Institute. I'm an author of several best-selling foster care books, an international speaker and trainer, and I have been a foster parent to over 60 plus children who have come to my home and been part of my family. Over the years, as you can imagine, we've seen many children come to live in our home who have had issues of non-compliance and defiance, and this is an issue that I'm quite familiar with personally. Our goal during this Foster Care Institute webinar is to bring awareness about non-compliance and defiance in children in foster care. Our key objectives are to increase your awareness of what non-compliance is and how it impacts foster parenting. And you will gain an understanding of how to develop and implement strategies designed to aid children with issues of non-compliance. We hear a lot about non-compliance in foster care. What is it? Well, according to an online dictionary, this is a definition of non-compliance. Quote, failure to act in accordance with a wish or command, end quote. Quite simply, non-compliance is when a child does not follow rules. Now, this non-compliance can occur in your home or any home. It can occur at school. It can occur at church. It can occur in grocery store, your friend's house. It can occur during a visitation, occur in any sort of social setting. Have you ever had a child placed in your home that might look like this? I have many times over the years. So, with that in mind, why might a child placed in the foster care system, placed in a foster care home, perhaps placed in your home, why might that child not follow rules? Well, let's examine. As we've discussed here several times here at the Foster Care Institute and in several of our books, I want you to imagine a child, maybe a 7-year-old child, suddenly without any type of warning whatsoever and any type of understanding that he's able to have. He is removed from his mother, removed from his father, maybe removed from siblings, removed from his pets, his toys, stuffed animals, removed from his bedroom, his kitchen, his house, his home, taken from school or removed from school, removed from relatives, kinship, maybe grandparents, aunts, uncles, cousins. If it goes to church, taken from church, taken from all that's familiar to him. And he's placed into a foster care home, perhaps your home, perhaps my home. This is a time of tremendous uncertainty for that child. And as we've discussed many times here, the child may have questions they've asked in my own home. Why am I here? When do I go home? Did I do something wrong? Do my parents not love me anymore? Who are these strange people? Will they hurt me? It's a time of uncertainty. For some, it might be a time of guilt. Perhaps they have guilt. Perhaps a child feels they are at fault in some way. Maybe they feel they are to be blamed for being removed from their home. Maybe they feel they did something so terrible that their parents didn't want them anymore. Perhaps their parents are incarcerated and the children feel guilt for that. They might feel it's their fault that mommy and daddy are in jail, so to speak. Sometimes the children, quite simply, are unable to express themselves. Perhaps their emotions are so overwhelming, emotions that are swirling inside of them, emotions they don't know how to process, and as a result, they simply can't express themselves. When a child is placed into foster care environment, it is a time of tremendous trauma. Grief and loss, these children experience feelings of grief and loss. You can put aside all the trauma that they may have experienced in the home before being placed into foster care. It is a time of trauma being placed into a home, into a stranger's home, into my home, into your home, into a foster parent's home. As we said, it's a time of confusion. The child might not understand why he was placed into another home. He may not understand why he is removed from an environment that might be abusive or neglectful. He may not be understanding of why he was placed into your home or a foster parent's home where there is stability and structure and consistency. Confusion abounds. Others might see it as an illogical or irrational move, particularly those children who are older, maybe young teenagers. They may see it as an illogical move. Again, they might blame themselves. Sometimes a child might feel they're no longer loved. And maybe the children feels they've been abandoned. Maybe the child feels that his mother and father simply don't want him anymore and they've abandoned him. And as a result, he ends up in a foster care home. Now, as I noted earlier, it is a time of trauma for the child. The National Children's Traumatic Stress Network defines traumatic stress as the following. Quote, the physical and emotional responses of a child to events that threaten the life or physical integrity of the child or someone critically important to the child. End quote. And again, we thank the National Children's Traumatic Stress Network for this definition. So as we mentioned, it is a time of trauma. Being placed into a foster care home is a traumatic experience. But why might children be placed into foster care? Well, due to perhaps traumatic experiences. Maybe they've had prolonged separation from family. Maybe a death of a family member. Various forms of abuse, sexual, physical, mental, etc. Perhaps they've witnessed abuse to others. Indeed, roughly 5 million children in the United States experience or witness domestic violence or domestic abuse in their own home. Maybe the child is homeless. I think back to one of our placements in our own home where we had a 3-year-old and a 18-month-old wandering along the highway in diapers, rescued by the sheriff's department and placed in our home. I think of the 4-year-old, the 2-year-old, the 1-year-old who were homeless for quite some time, living off canned food in diapers. I think of the 17-year-old who was homeless. I think of the 13-year-old who was homeless in her home. Perhaps a child is placed into foster care due to drugs or alcohol in the family. Perhaps they were neglected. I think of the 4-year-old who came to our house. He only knew 2 words, me hungry. Me hungry is all he said. And all of his teeth were rotted out, and he was on a bottle of Diet Coke, a baby's bottle of Diet Coke by his mother. I read about him in the book Fostering Love, One Foster Parent's Journey. He had experienced neglect. Maybe they were abandoned. Perhaps their parents were imprisoned. These are some of the reasons why a child might be placed into foster care, and these again are traumatic experiences. The term multiple displacement might be a term you're familiar with. It's when a child's experience in the foster care environment is disrupted, placement disruption, if you will. When he's removed from one home and placed into another home multiple times, multiple disruptions, multiple displacements. When a child moves from one home to the next, to the next, and to the next, they suffer a number of issues. Emotional, social, psychological effects are felt by the child when he moves from one home to the next while in foster care. Indeed, the mental health of the child is threatened each time they are removed from one home and placed in the next. Issues of trust, issues of attachment. In addition to this, the child's academic performance in school suffers each time they move from one home to the next. According to many statistics and according to the book Helping Foster Children in School, children in foster care are generally 18 months behind academically and suffer from low reading and math skills. In truth, a child in foster care's academic performance is lower traditionally than the traditional student. So, how does this involve non-compliance? Well, when a child moves from one home to the next, or when a child has experienced such trauma, or a child might experience issues of trust. They do not know how to trust someone. They have issues of attachment. They've experienced issues of abuse. They're confused. They're lonely. They are afraid. They may experience guilt, etc. Well, they may not follow your foster parenting rules, the rules of the home, the foster parents, quite simply because he's afraid. Child might not follow the rules because he is afraid. Children in foster care might be afraid of the new environment, the new parents, if you will, the new home, these rules that they do not understand, rules they're confused by, rules that might quite simply make no sense to him. I recall several times we've had children placed in our home who came from homes and environments where there was no structure, there was no consistency, there were quite simply no rules. Perhaps you've experienced the same. In addition, a child might experience issues of noncompliance because he lacks motivation to follow or to comply to the rules. There's nothing in him that might motivate him to do so. Or he might be non-compliant to the family's rules because he might not have learned how to follow specific rules or guidelines in the families or household chores or tasks. He did not know how to do that because he was never taught those skills. He was never taught about family rules, family guidelines, or doing household chores, if you will. Another reason for noncompliance might be the child might have autism or might have ADHD or behavior issues, emotional symptoms. They may have difficulty focusing on more than one task. A child might be noncompliant because of the child's age or the development of the child. For much more on this, I encourage you to watch Child Development Part 1 and Child Development Part 2 here at the Foster Care Institute in our training webinar section. Child might be noncompliant because he may not be old enough. He might not be mature enough to understand the expectations that are placed upon him or expected of him or the household rules. He might not understand your rules due to his behavior, due to his age, due to his development, due to his immaturity. Child placed in your home might be non-compliant because he's impulsive. He's not intentionally trying to break the rules in the home. He's not intentionally trying to break the rules in the school. For example, he might not be able to sit still in his chair for such a long time until the bell rings. He might not be able to sit in that school chair until the bell rings, until he's excused. Because again, because of age or development or maturity or perhaps of some type of disorder. A child might be non-compliant because he's not developed a sense of right or wrong. I've had many children placed in my own home who did not have a sense of right or wrong because they were quite simply never taught that. And perhaps you've experienced the same thing. So we've examined why a child might be non-compliant. But what does that look like? What does non-compliance look like? What are some of the symptoms? Well, let's look at those symptoms. Some of the symptoms include child yelling no at you. He's acting defiant. He's being defiant. He's running away, perhaps even. He might make excuses When you've asked him to do something and he does not do it, he might make some sort of excuse for not following through on what you've asked him to do. Perhaps you have the children in your home. Maybe a child's chore each evening at the dinner is to sweep the floor, or maybe to take out the garbage, or maybe to feed the dog or cat, or maybe to help with the dishes. And he doesn't do so because, well, he has an excuse to do so. Or maybe he yells at you no. He might simply ignore what you've asked him to do. Or maybe he's forgotten what you've asked him to do. This happens in school often. He might forget the instructions the teacher gave him and does not follow through on his schoolwork. He does not follow through on the task assigned to him in school. He might have some math work to do, or maybe some spelling work, or working on a history project, whatever it might be, and he doesn't do it. He's being non-compliant. Well, he might have a difficult time following through the task. He might say he forgot the instructions. This is another example of what non-compliance might look like. Children who are non-compliant sometimes appear to be unable to completely follow a task or to completely complete the task assigned to him. Maybe the teacher in school has asked him to do problems 1 through 10 in math class, and he's unable to complete those assignments or even begin to do the assignment or follow the directions. This might be an example of noncompliance. Another symptom might be the child simply irritable. You've asked him to do a simple task. Would you please make your bed? Would you please brush your teeth? Would you please pick up the clothes? And he becomes irritable when you've asked him to do so. Have you had a child in your home like that? He might simply refuse to do what is asked of him. Selective listening is another symptom of noncompliance. He might make such comments like, I didn't hear you. I couldn't understand what you said. I didn't hear it. This is a symptom of noncompliance. And finally, he might simply tune out. He might tune out to you. He might not listen to the parental figure, the caseworker, the teacher, the counselor, etc. And we thank Katie and Katie.com for these examples of these symptoms. So perhaps you have had children in your home who are non-compliant. Perhaps there's a child placed in your home right now who is showing symptoms of non-compliance. Perhaps you're working with a child that is non-compliant. How do we help these children? Well, to begin with, it's perhaps most importantly, do not take their behavior personally. It has nothing to do with you. Yes, he may be yelling no at you. He may be refusing to pick up the room. He may have told you he forgot. Whatever it might be, it has nothing to do with you. It has everything to do with him. Remember, he's confused. He's afraid. He's scared. He's overwhelmed with feelings he might not know how to process. He might be feeling guilty. He might have a disorder. It has nothing to do with you. When he's yelling at you and he's being defiant toward you and he's being non-compliant, it's not towards you. It has everything to do with him and how he might be feeling or some type of disorder he's experiencing or challenged with. So do not take his behavior personally. There are some things that you should not do when you're caring for children who are non-compliant. Do not make an empty promise to him, or do not make an empty threat to him. Instead, it's important that you follow through with what you say you're going to do, and you be consistent in doing so. If you say, if you do so-and-so, then you'll be rewarded with this. Or if you do not do so-and-so, there will be a consequence. It's important that you follow through with what you said. And you're consistent with your praise and your consequences. Do not give in to his non-compliance. Do not give in to him refusing to do what you've asked him to do. Do not give in to his resistance. Do not give in to his demands. Finally, do not give him overt attention when he is acting in a non-compliant fashion. But it's also important at the same time that you do not ignore the problem, hoping that it's simply going to go away, because it will not. One way you can help with noncompliance is by positive parenting skills. Positive parenting helps to develop and create a strong and committed relationship between the child and the parental figure, or the adult, if you will. This positive parenting relationship is based upon communication and it's based upon respect. Positive parenting focuses on helping the child to understand both the what and the why of the consequences or the disciplines, whatever that might be, and the behavior. And positive parenting also focuses on the importance and how to have self control. This is one way you can help those children who are non-compliant. Now, for much more on what positive parenting is and how to act in a positive parenting style, I encourage you to watch the webinar here at the Foster Care Institute, Positive Parenting Solutions. Again, you can find that here at the Foster Care Institute. When you're working with children who are non-compliant, it's so important that you're clear. When you've asked him to do some sort of task, when you've asked him to accomplish a task, follow the rules, whatever it might be, it's important that you are very, very clear with your requests and with your rules and with your expectations. That means you need to talk to him in a style, in a format, and in a way using words that he understands, using words that are at his level, using words that he's able to comprehend. It's also important that you're very reasonable, you're very realistic with your expectations of him. Don't ask him to do something that he's incapable of doing. Do not ask him to do something that you know his maturity level or his age level or his ability level does not allow him to do. So be realistic and be clear. It's quite helpful for children who are non-compliant for you to break the tasks down. If there are many things you've asked them to do, perhaps there's a series of chores you've asked a child to do. If there are multiple tasks, maybe homework, maybe there's several things in homework he has to do. Again, questions 1 through 10 in math, or maybe math and spelling words after school, whatever it might be. If there are multiple tasks to be done or accomplished, consider breaking them down into small tasks, or maybe one by one, or singular tasks. Make these tasks manageable. Make them manageable ones for his age and maturity level, or for his developmental stage. Now, when a child is non-compliant, again, he might be defiant. He might be aggressive in his tone. He might be yelling at you. He might be yelling no. Well, it's important that you remain in control, that you regulate your own emotions. Be patient with him. Be compassionate. Be generous. And be the loving parent that every child wants, every child needs. Do not come at him yelling back at him. Do not raise your voice at him. Do not have a hostile tone towards him or be aggressive. Again, make sure that you remain in control. Use calm tones when you're speaking to him. Regulate your own emotions. Have patience with him. For those children who are non-compliant and aggressive or defiant, he might need a cooling down period, if you will. So allow him to cool down. Allow him to calm down by taking a break of some sort. Maybe to sitting on the couch or sitting in a chair, maybe going to his room, have a calming down period. This allows him to calm down and to refocus. So find a cool down area in the home. Perhaps it's the couch, or maybe it's a soft chair, or maybe it's his bedroom. Have some soft pillows, some cushions, maybe some sensory toys for him to play with if he's young. Some soft music in the background. This helps him to find a sense of calm. You're helping to bring calm. Help him develop some breathing techniques and relationship skills as well. When you can see that he's visibly upset, When you can hear in his voice that he is, again, upset in some fashion, tell him it's okay to feel the way that he feels. Say, and you give those words to his emotions. I see that you're upset right now. I can hear that you're angry, and that's okay. I believe you're confused right now, and that's all right. I can tell that you're very, very upset. I can see it in your face, and that's okay. I understand. Give him words to his emotions so he better understands what he's experiencing, and tell him again that it's okay to feel that way. Allow him to feel those emotions. Remember, being placed into a stranger's home is a very traumatic time, and he may not understand it. He may be overwhelmed with these feelings of confusion, grief, guilt, loss, etc. So allow him to feel that way, and sometimes that leads to anger. When a child is non-compliant, it can be helpful if you ask him some questions. Questions like to help determine his behavior. Try to ask open-ended questions, neutral style questions. Open-ended question is an opposite of a why question. You do not ask him, why did you act this way? Why did you do this? Why won't you do that? Why won't you take the garbage out? Why were you yelling at me? Avoid those sort of questions. So ask him open-ended questions and then give him an opportunity to explain why he might be acting in such a way, or describe something in their own understanding, which develops their thinking skills, their speech, their vocabulary, their language. Here are some examples of some open-ended questions. This is a close-ended question. Are you okay? An open-ended question might be, how are you? This allows him to explore how he might be feeling. A closed-ended question is, do you like chocolate ice cream? An open-ended question is, what is your favorite ice cream flavor? And why is that? A closed-ended question is, did you like the movie? An open-ended question might be, what's your takeaway, or what's your insight from that movie? How did you feel about that movie? A closed-ended question, what is your toy's name? An open-ended question is, your toy is beautiful. Tell me more about the toy. A closed-ended question is, do you read this book? An open-ended question might be, what made you decide to read the book? Again, open-ended questions allow him to have a thought process about it and to explore his own feelings, his own thoughts about it, and to discuss it. Again, helps him develop his language skills. We thank the Gathered Again and gatheredagain.com for these examples of open-ended questions. For those children who are non-compliant, one way to help is to form a relationship with them. It is imperative, essential, it is necessary for all young children to form a healthy relationship with at least one main caregiver or at least one adult figure in their life in order to develop both socially and emotionally. That main caretaker or adult figure might be a teacher, it might be a foster parent, it might be a caseworker, it could be very well their parent. But it is so important for a child to develop a healthy relationship with at least one person, and that one person might be you. So, form a relationship with the child placed in your home or the child that you're working with. Look for ways to spend time with the child individually each day. In my own home, my wife and I try to have some sort of special time with each child once a week. We've had as many as 11 children placed in our home at the same time. We have 6 children of our own. And we try to spend time individually with each child at least once a week. And we try to spend individual time with each child once a day as well, if possible. Some days that might quite simply not be possible. Give the child the positive, the emotional attention that they need, that they deserve, that they must have each day. If you do not give the child positive attention, then they're going to find it elsewhere. They will seek it out elsewhere in negative ways. And many times this leads to them looking for that behavior, that attention, if you will, online. We have a whole webinar based on that. As little as 10 to 15 minutes each day makes a tremendous difference. If you can spend 10 to 15 minutes each day with a child and showing that child positive and emotional attention, 10 to 15 minutes each day, it makes a tremendous difference, especially for those children who have issues of trust, who have issues of attachment, who've experienced trauma, and are filled with anxiety. One way you can help a child who is non-compliant is to try to understand why they might be misbehaving in a certain fashion. This misbehavior may seem very reasonable and logical to you. I'm sorry. It might seem very reasonable and logical to the child. For you, you might not understand why they're behaving in this fashion. But for that child, it can be very reasonable. Quite simply, they don't want to follow the rules because they have a reason for it. So try to determine why they're behaving in this fashion. One way you can help him is by understanding his trauma. Try to understand, find out why he was placed in foster care, to find out if the child and family have been impacted by trauma and traumatic events in their life in some way. When you do so, then find some services that are based on his unique circumstances. Find some therapy or counseling sessions to help the child. When you're talking to him, make sure you talk to him in a fashion that he can understand. Have language-appropriate conversations. Language-appropriate conversations for his age group and his maturity level. Not only is there a reason for his behavior, and hopefully you've discovered that by asking him questions and trying to find out his family history, it's also important to understand how his brain develops. Young children cannot reason, as part of the brain is fully developed yet for making decision-making and understanding consequences. Again, we go into this on the two-part webinar series here at the Foster Care Institute, Child Development Part 1 and Child Development Part 2. And again, I would encourage you to watch those two webinars. He might deny he did anything wrong. He's simply refusing to do the rules. He's simply refusing to do what you've asked him to do. And he might say, he didn't understand. He didn't hear. He forgot. Whatever it might be. He might deny he did something wrong. Help him acknowledge that what he did, the poor decision was made. That he did make a poor decision. That he did refuse to follow the directions. That he did refuse to take out the garbage. Whatever it might be. Help him acknowledge that a poor decision was made. At the same time, reassure him that the consequence is not going to hurt the child. The consequence will help the child understand the importance of good decision making. Consequences are there to help him understand the importance of good behavior and to protect him. You want to make sure the child understands that any sort of consequence in the home is not there to hurt him, but to help him and to protect him. And when you are assigning some sort of consequence to his misbehavior, to his noncompliance, it's also important that you remind him that you care for him, that he's important, and that you love him. Redirection is one way to help a child who's noncompliant. Redirection is a form of discipline that is becoming much more popular in society today. Redirection allows the parent, the foster parent, the parental figure, maybe even a caseworker. It allows the adult to guide and steer the child's misbehavior from one that's inappropriate to one that is more appropriate. Now, when a child is redirected, it allows him to explore new ideas, new opportunities, new experiences, and to learn new skills. If you're unfamiliar with what redirection is, I point you to the redirection examples In the training webinar here at the Foster Care Institute, Discipline and Children in Foster Care. Discipline and Children in Foster Care examines redirection and so much more. And if you've not watched that webinar, I encourage you to do so. All of us need to hear words of praise every single day. We like to hear if we did a good job and if we're appreciated. Well, the child placed in your home quite simply may have never had those words said to him. He may have never had any sort of encouraging words said to him in any way at any time by anyone in his life. He needs you. He needs you to praise him. He needs you to encourage him. He needs you to use words of encouragement and praise every single day. And here are many examples that you can use. Thank you so much for taking out the garbage. I'm so grateful for your help. Wow, every time you feed the cat, this cat is so happy to see you. Look at the cat's tail wagging. The cat must love you. Wow, your room is so fantastic. You did a great job cleaning up, and look how perfect your bed looks. Hey, thank you so much for doing it the first time I asked you. My goodness, your homework is fantastic. Look at the grades you made. You did a great job. Hey, I really enjoyed doing the dishes with you. Thank you for helping me with the dishes. My goodness, look at this drawing you did. This is beautiful. Can I put this in the refrigerator for all of us to see? He needs to hear words like this from you every single day. In addition, catch him in the act. But don't catch him in the act of being bad, if you will. Catch him in the act of being good. Look for opportunities each day when he's doing the right thing, when he's behaving in a positive fashion, and praise him for doing just that. One way you're going to help the child who's being non-compliant is to distract him. Learn how to distract the child from engaging in behavior that's not acceptable. Look for ways to distract him from doing something that you think is wrong or non-compliant and redirect him. And look for ways to bring humor to a situation, to lighten the mood, if you will. Most likely you've heard of the phrase time out. Are you familiar with time in? Time in is a form of discipline when non-compliance or disobedience or misbehavior occurs. When a child is placed in time in, the child is placed close to you, close proximity to you. Perhaps a child is sitting on a couch in the same room while you're folding laundry or maybe working on homework. A child might be sitting at a stool in the kitchen while you're doing dishes. Maybe the two of you are sitting together at a table working on a puzzle. Maybe the child is sitting next to you on the couch while you're reading a book. Time in allows a child to be close to you or an adult instead of away in a separate environment, in a separate room, far away, like time out is. Time in allows a child to feel their needs are being considered because they're near you. There's a connection between the parent and the child before the correction is presented. You're sitting next to the child. The child is in the same room with you. There's a connection between the two of you before you sit down and start discussing what might have gone wrong or maybe the misbehavior. See, children are given time during time in to properly process a range of feelings because they're still around you. You don't have that sense of control or that power struggle, if you will, to keep a child placed in the timeout corner. A child does not feel isolated. A child does not feel shame. A child does not feel scared because they're placed in a separate place in time in. In time out. Time in, they're close to you. So it gives you and the child the opportunity to talk about the real issues at hand, to talk about the misbehavior, talk about the choices made, talk about the consequences that might be in place. We do a deep dive of time in the book, The Foster Care Survival Guide. A child needs to feel safe. When a child feels safe, they might be more compliant. You see, many times children in foster care do not feel safe, so they may lash out, they may act out, they might be non-compliant. Safety is a priority for all children. Each child needs to feel safe. They could be triggered by noises. They might be triggered by the nighttime or darkness. They might be triggered by ways that you don't expect. So it's important for you to ensure the child is safe. Remind him he's safe at all times. Let him know that it's just a noise. I'm right here. Perhaps it's a rainy night and there's a thunderbolt. Loud thunderbolt. Go upstairs, go to his bedroom, let him know that you're still here, that he's safe. If you see that he's being triggered by something, let him know that you're here, he is safe. Remind him that nothing's going to hurt him while he's in your house, and you are there to keep him safe. When he feels safe, he will be more compliant. Now, when you're working with children who are non-compliant, it can be exhausting. It can be mentally exhausting. It can be emotionally exhausting. It can be physically exhausting at times. You might quite simply feel burned out. You might quite simply feel frustrated yourself. You might just be tired of his non-compliance. If that's the case, it's so important that you take time for yourself. Remember, as we said here several times at the Foster Care Institute, if you can't care for yourself, you can't care for the children in your home. It's also important to remember this. How you treat him is how he will treat himself. So if you're harsh to him, he's going to be harsh to himself. If you're critical of him, he will be critical of himself. If you're yelling at him, he'll be yelling back. He'll be yelling at himself. But if you are gentle, if you're respectful, if you're kind and you're loving towards him, then after a while, that's how he will treat himself. It's important to keep this in mind. This may take time. He may have never had anybody be gentle towards him. He may have never had anybody respect him as a human being. He may have never had anybody be kind towards him. He may have never been loved. So when you are gentle and respectful and kind and loving and compassionate and patient, etc., it may take time for him to realize, I can trust these people. These people are not going to hurt me. And after a while, again, it may take time, he will accept that. Hey, when you're working with children who are non-compliant, sometimes it's important for us to remember to smile. So I encourage you, smile. We've mentioned a number of webinars here at the Foster Care Institute, and if you're not a member, I encourage you to join and become a special member so you can get 12 months unlimited access to our entire library of online training webinars, printable certificates, CEUs, free ebooks, and so much more. For much more, visit the Foster Care Institute at drjohndegarmofostercare.com. If you don't already, please follow me on Facebook, Dr. John DeGarmo Foster Care Institute, where we always are posting information about foster parenting. Follow me on Twitter. If you have questions about this information, this webinar, or anything else I can help you with, simply email me at drjohndegarmo@gmail.com. We mentioned the book, The Foster Care Survival Guide, the essential guide for today's foster parents. It dives into many of these issues here. And we have many books here at the Foster Care Institute bookstore. I'm sure there's a book available right now that you just might need as you care for children in crisis. I want to thank you for watching this webinar. But more importantly, I want to thank you for what you do. It is not an easy job. It's a difficult, challenging lifestyle at times. To me, it's been the hardest thing I've done. It's been the most rewarding thing I've done. But yes, there have been times where I have felt challenged by caring for children in foster care. It's a job, if you will, that so few will do. You're making a difference. You're changing the world of a child in crisis. You are helping a child who desperately needs it. So for that, I thank you. For the Foster Care Institute, I'm Dr. John DeGarmo.